Hi everyone, how are you? Welcome to our classic virtual tasting. This is with our 5-piece classic sampler, so make sure you all have your samplers in front of you. Looks like a lot of you are joining us from the west and the northeast, a little southeast. Love it. Welcome back to anyone who's done this before, and for those of you whose first time it is doing this, welcome. I'm Lauren, I will be your host for today. I will go over some ground rules on the tasting, then I will quickly go over the history of Ethel M, and then I will introduce Tammy Jo, who will be your chocolatier for tonight. So really quickly, this is usually a pretty interactive experience when we do it in person. So to supplement that, we have the Q&A function, which will be any questions that you have throughout the tasting, anything you're curious about, go ahead and write that into the Q&A function. Anything like any thoughts about what you're tasting, flavor notes you're getting, go ahead and put that in the chat function. So that's more for you all to interact with each other, what you're liking, different flavor notes, what you think about each piece. We won't really be monitoring that, and we also won't be monitoring the raise hand function. So like I mentioned, since we can't hear or see any of you, we would love for you to tag us on social media. We have Instagram and Facebook if you want to tag us at Ethel M Chocolates or hashtag Ethel M Chocolates and post any photos or videos you have, how your setup is, so we can really see how you have that experience done. And then last thing I want to mention is we do have another tasting coming up on August 6th, which is our International Beer Day tasting. So I will offer a discount code at the very end, so make sure you stay all the way through for that. So you can purchase at a little bit of a discount. So I'll go ahead and get into the history of Ethel M Chocolates for those of you who are not familiar. That top left photo is a photo of Forrest Mars. Him and his father, Frank Mars, actually started the Mars Chocolate Company, which many of you are familiar with, like the Twix, the Snickers, Skittles, M&Ms, all of that is Mars, as well as Ethel M Chocolates. We're more the gourmet side of it. So Forrest retires and moves to Henderson, Nevada, where he wants to start making chocolate again. And this time using his mother's recipes, Ethel, where he learned to make in their kitchen in Tacoma, Washington, dating back to 1911. So you'll see in that top middle photo is where we're located. We are just about 15 minutes away from the strip, so you can see the strip in the background. We're a quick drive off of it. We have our factory where we make all the pieces, and then our cactus garden right outside of that. And there's some close-up pictures on the right side. But to give you a good idea, it's about 3 acres and over 300 species of different cactus that we have. So it's really beautiful to walk through. It's free and open to the public. So if you're ever in Las Vegas, please come out and see us. It's really, really fun, especially if you're here during the holiday season. So from November 6th to January 5th, we decorate our entire garden with over 1 million LED lights. You can see a little preview in that bottom middle photo. It's completely, every cactus is covered in lights. It's really beautiful to see. We have holiday decor all over the place. It's a big winter wonderland. So especially during that time, come out and see us. The last thing I want to mention is one of my favorite things about the company, and it's how sustainably focused we are. So that left bottom photo is, it doesn't even do it justice, but it's a 4-acre solar panel garden that we have just outside of our cactus garden. And that will generate enough energy to power our factory during its peak production hours. So we are totally run off of solar power during the busiest times of our day, which is amazing. And it's pretty cool to say. It's one of the things I love to brag about with Ethel M. So without further ado, I know you all are wanting to try the chocolate. We will go ahead and get into it. I'll introduce Tammy Jo. She will be your chocolatier, guiding you through all the pieces for tonight. She has been with us for over 20 years. She originally started learning about the factory side of things and then transitioned to the retail side, where she trains associates, does multiple tastings daily, does tours of the factory and garden, and continues her education on chocolate through Mars. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Tammy Jo.
Hello, everybody. I am Tammy Jo. How are you guys doing tonight? Welcome to our virtual chocolate tasting. We're very excited that you all could join us today. So as Lauren was saying, I have been here for 20 years, so I have lots of experience on how to eat chocolate, and I'm going to share you all my knowledge of the trees and how the machines work and how to eat chocolate in a more interesting way. So without further ado, let's get into the tools that we're going to use to do this. So we have a set of guidelines, and it's going to help you bring out the flavor in your piece and really appreciate everything that goes into making chocolate. So step one is touch. We're really going to think about, like, what is touch? You know, how does it feel? What's the texture? Is it bumpy? Is it smooth? What created that smooth texture? What created that bumpy texture? How is it made? And then we're going to go into taste. So taste is 80% of our smell. So by smelling your chocolate, you're heightening your taste buds, you're getting yourself prepared and ready for that flavor. Then we're going to go ahead and take a bite. So on taste, you're going to take a bite, you're going to chew a couple times, push it up to the roof of your mouth, and you want to like slow it down and just let it melt away before you dive on in and like eat it right away. You don't want to eat it fast. We're so used to just like grabbing it and like eating the chocolate. We're going to slow it down. I'm going to make you eat chocolate slower than you've ever eaten chocolate before. So let's start with our first piece, and we'll talk about that. So the first piece that we're going to be trying is our sea salt caramel. This is a pretty interesting piece on how it's made. It's got that delicious salt on top. So what we're going to do, and there's two ways to eat this piece, is salt up, and then you're going to flip it over and you're going to do salt down. So with touch, we're noticing that it's kind of smooth. It has more of a matte finish, right? It's kind of bumpy because it has a little salt on top of it. So now let's smell the piece and really try to see, can you actually smell the caramel that's inside, or can you smell just the chocolate? I can smell the salt, but I can't really smell the caramel. Like everybody smells and senses are different. So everyone's going to taste and smell something different. So go ahead and take a bite. So delicious. So this is our flavor wheel. And the flavor wheel is going to help you identify all those flavors you're noticing in each piece. So take a look at it. There's also some side notes. So if you're having a beverage, a beer or a wine with this, there's some side notes there if you're interested in that, so that you know which ones pair really well with this particular piece, okay? And then as you're enjoying it, we're going to talk about how this piece was made. So really think about the texture, the taste, how it's melting on your palate. What are you noticing? On the slide, we also have the flavor wheel, and that's also going to help you identify what you're noticing. So this piece goes into dairy because of the milk chocolate. It also goes into dairy because of the butter. It also goes into sweet aromatics because of the fact that it's a caramel. It kind of has like a toffee flavor to it as well. And it goes into spices. We don't have it listed, but salt is a spice. So there's a little bit of salt on there. On your second bite of this piece, what I want you to do is I want you to flip it upside down. It's going to land on your palate in a different pattern. So it's going to be salt chocolate caramel. So go ahead and take another bite upside down. So what did you guys think of that? Did you notice the salt more this time? Which way do you like it? Do you like it salt up or salt down? Kind of discuss that in the little chat box and let everyone know what you think. So this piece is very chewy, very fudgy. So it has to go through an enrobing machine. And then on the slide that you see, there's two guys holding this big metal pot, and they have to have two guys because there's such a heavy pot. They have to pour it on the table by hand. They spread it out. They know exactly how to pull the caramel to fill the entire table. It goes into a cooling tunnel or a cooling table where the pipes go underneath and cool the table. And then as it's cooled, they cut it and go through an enrobing machine. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But in the photo here, you can see that they're actually hand sprinkling the salt on every single piece. And they do that for all of our sea salt caramels, which is pretty cool. The other tool that we're going to be using is our placemat. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So this is our placemat, and this is going to help you identify, again, the flavor notes with that flavor wheel. Sometimes it's on the tip of your tongue because you're eating it. It's literally on the tip of your tongue and you're like, what is it? What do I taste? Use this flavor wheel. It's going to help you. It's going to help you identify what you're noticing that's different that you might not have noticed before. And then there's like the name of the piece, sight and feel, like what did you feel? What did you notice about the texture? How is the aroma? What did it smell like? What did you first notice? Did you notice the filling or did you notice the chocolate? Write those things down because as we go into it, your first piece, your first expression of it is like, oh, wow, that's my favorite piece. The next one's gonna be like, oh, wow, that's my, because it's gonna get better and better and better. So you wanna like write down what you think about each piece. So that way you have a good idea of what one was your favorite and so on. So let's get into some fun facts about the chocolate. So cacao trees can only grow 20 degrees north and south of the equator because of the environment. They have very high humidity, lots of shade, and this area where they're growing doesn't really get cold. There's no winter, there's no season. It's just always the perfect weather, around 80 degrees and high humidity. So that way they have lots of moisture. So our cacao trees, well, let me rephrase that. Cacao trees grow in the dark shaded areas, and the area where we get ours is the mostly from Brazil, Indonesia, and West Africa, but they can grow throughout this whole region right here, South America, West Africa, and parts of Asia. Well, let's dive into some more fun facts about the trees themselves. So as you can see in the photo, we have the cacao tree. So the cacao tree, it blooms all over the tree. So when the flowers bloom, and again, there's no season, so it can bloom year round. When they bloom, they cover the entire tree, not just the branches, but the trunk as well. And this is like a rough replica of what it looks like when they're about to harvest. They can vary in color. Sometimes they're reddish brown, sometimes they're more of an orange color. A lot of the time they're yellow, and the color doesn't really affect the flavor of the bean, just so you guys know. So when they're ready to get them off the tree, they have to use machete technology because the stem of the pod is very thick. They can't just grab it and twist it and pull it off the tree like you would with like an apple or something. You have to use like a machete to cut it off. So they use a machete to cut off the pod itself. Once they gather the amount they need, they're going to start cracking them open and getting the goods inside. So let's go back to that slide where it showed you all of those cool photos. And this is going to show you what it looks like when they're cracking it open. So you can see the kind of beans are almost, to me, it kind of looks like corn on the cob, but yet not. It's kind of like all stuck together in this big clump. And those are the beans. And they're covered in this really gooey, creamy pulp. And if you were to try a bean, it actually tastes like mango or even like pineapple. It's very tropical. It actually tastes really good, even though it doesn't look very appealing. So if you ever get the opportunity to try one, even though it doesn't look good, try it. It's really interesting. The bean is very crunchy, like a nut, and it has like a lot of like, kind of like you're eating like an espresso bean. So that's kind of like what it's like if you eat it raw like that. So once they open the pods, they gather all the beans, they're going to go into fermenting. Basically, there's a large box. They put all the beans in a big, huge heap, and they sit there for 5 days. And then that creates acidicness. It burns off the pulp. And by doing that, it changes the acidicness of the bean and prepares it for making chocolate. The last stage of this part is the sun drying table where they spread it out in a thinner layer so it can get a nice golden suntan and dry up. All right, I feel like it's time to eat some more chocolate, yeah? Let's get into the next piece of chocolate. So one thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you cleanse your palate between each new piece that you try. So if you're finished with that piece, you want to get a water or drink of choice and cleanse your palate between each new piece. So go ahead and do that and then start unwrapping your chocolate. This one is in a foil. And that's because this one is completely smothered in crushed almonds. And we want to make sure that we don't lose any of those nuts. So we foil it so that way it will hold all those nuts on so you get all of that flavor. So this piece, if you touch it, you can kind of tell it's very bumpy. It's got a really weird texture because of all those nuts. It's really bumpy. It's not smooth at all. And it feels really hard. Okay, so go ahead and smell your chocolate. I smell kind of like a woody flavor. I smell almonds. I don't really smell the chocolate. I just smell the nuts. So let's go ahead and take a bite. Nice snap. This is a really buttery, it's covered in milk chocolate, and then it has that crushed almond. So it is a almond toffee covered in milk chocolate. So this is going to go into a couple different categories on the flavor wheel. So it goes into dairy, it goes into roasted, it goes into nutty, and sweet aromatics. The reason why this is a good combination is because you get that earthy tone from the nut, kind of has like a woody flavor. You're getting the almond, you're getting the milk chocolate and the dairy, and lots of butter from that really rich buttery toffee. So as you're enjoying this piece, I'm going to describe to you how this piece was made. So as you can tell, it has a really hard crunch. It's really a firm piece. So if it's firm, it can go through a machine called the enrobing machine, and that's how they get a coating of chocolate. So basically the piece is poured onto the table similar to the caramel. They hand cut all the pieces, and then they place them on the conveyor belt, and they'll go through a machine called the enrober, which is basically a large trough, and it pumps the chocolate into the trough, creating a curtain of constant flowing chocolate. I know, right? Like I totally want to go through a curtain of chocolate too. And so the pieces go through that curtain of chocolate. They get smothered on all sides. After that, they will then fall onto a tray, and someone will be holding a tray full of the crushed almonds, and then they hand toss all of those pieces. And then they put it onto the rack so it can cool. They grab another tray of almonds and they catch the next batch and they hand toss it. And that's what this piece goes through. After that, then they are hand foiled, or they go through a foiling machine, but they double check it and they hand squeeze each piece to confirm that it is completely sealed properly. So each one gets a little hug. All right, so go ahead and cleanse your palate and we'll move on to the next piece of chocolate. So this one is our pecan caramel rapture. This one's very different. It doesn't have a unique, it's unique in the way that it's kind of like a snowflake. So every single piece is gonna look a little different. And it's gonna have different little ridges, different little bumps. And so it's very like bumpy and also smooth. So you can kind of tell right away that it's gonna have nuts in it, right? So it's gonna have a matte finish, just like the sea salt caramel did. So this is also a piece that has been enrobed. So we kind of know it's gonna be like a firm piece. Let's go ahead and smell it and see what we can detect with our noses. I can't really smell the caramel, but I can smell the pecans. So what we're gonna do, hopefully you haven't taken a bite yet. If you have, that's okay too. Just cleanse your palate and get ready for your second bite. What we're gonna do is we're gonna plug our nose and then take a bite. So hold your nose shut, take your bite. You're gonna chew a couple times, push it up to the roof of your mouth, and then let it melt. And then release your nose. You wanna hold it for as long as you can, but release before you pass out. So let's go ahead and do that. Smell, plug your nose, and take a bite. So talk about what flavors you got from that. For me, I got a lot of pecans. Like I can taste the pecans a lot more than when I were to just take a bite. I always taste the caramel first. But with this one, when I plug my nose and I release it, I get more of that woody, earthy tone from the nut itself. So this one goes into a lot of different categories. It goes into dairy with the buttery caramel, the rich milk chocolate. It goes into sweet aromatics with a little hint of vanilla. Even it tastes like honey and butterscotch. I'm tasting butterscotch because of the combination of the pecans and the caramel together have that butterscotch flavor. So this again is one of those pieces that's enrobed. It's very thick, it's very fudgy, but the extra step that this one takes is an extruder. So they make the caramel, but it's a different texture. It's a little bit softer than our chewy caramel. They make the caramel, they go through the extruder, and it drops little drops of caramel. And then there's another part of that machine that drops the nuts onto the caramel patties. From there, it will then go through the carton of chocolate and get covered, and then they will go through a cooling tunnel and get hand packed at the end. So this one's super chewy. It's packed full of nuts. Another thing that's really cool is they want to make sure that the ratio of caramel versus the ratio of nut is just right. Like sometimes you get a cluster with caramel and it just doesn't have enough nuts in it. They want to make sure that this piece has a nut in every single bite that you take. That was very important to Ethel and also Forest Mars. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, if you guys are finished with this piece, we're going to go ahead and learn some more fun facts about chocolate. So what happens after we get our beans ready? Well, once they're sun-dried and they're done with their tan, they have to get sorted. We sort through the beans, and what determines a good bean, a good bean versus a not so great bean is the color inside. So as you see the sorting photo, there is a board that they place all the beans in, they close it, and then they have a knife that slices through it to cut them open so they can split them all and see what's inside. The other photo we have is a picture of, and you want to think of it as meat, kind of like we want a well done steak versus a medium rare. We wouldn't want the beans to be medium rare because that means the fermentation process was not completed and it's not ready. So we'd always go for the darker, richer colored bean. That is the good one. And so we're going to sort through all of the beans. We're going to pick out all the ones that we want to get. They bag them and they ship them to Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, where they're then roasted to perfection for the type of chocolate they're going to make and then ground into a liquid chocolate. So from there, at that stage, when they ground it into a liquid, they can then separate cocoa butter from cocoa solid. And this is important because that is where they can determine what type of chocolate we're going to make. If they're making white chocolate, they're going to use just the cocoa butter, and they're going to add cream, sugar, vanilla, and a little bit of vanilla sometimes. And then that's the base of white chocolate. Now, milk chocolate is cocoa butter, cocoa solids, and they add some milk and sugar. And with dark chocolate, it just has less milk and less sugar and more of the cacao solid. And that's what the difference between milk and dark is. Milk has a lot more milk to it, and dark chocolate is more cacao, less cocoa butter, less milk, and less sugar. So once we got that blended, then we'll go into tempering. And the two ways to cover candy, enrobing and molding. So tempering is very important for your chocolate. You want it the right temperature so it doesn't melt too much to where it melts your filling that you've already cooled and prepped and ready to go. You have to have the right temperature or it's not going to turn out, it's not going to look right. It's not going to have the right texture when you bite into it. So we have these units that will heat them up. It heats it up to about 108 degrees. It'll slowly, gradually cool it down, and then it'll heat it back up, and then it will hold it at that right perfect temperature. Once we have the right temperature, then we are able to cover our pieces with the chocolate. The photo here that you're seeing is the enrober. So this is up close what that enrober looks like. You see that large vat full of chocolate. The pieces are going to go through and get covered. And it is a wire conveyor belt. So the chocolate just kind of falls right through those wires. And it lands back in the tank where the chocolate's being pumped from. So it just constantly flows and nothing is being wasted. From there, it'll go through a drizzling machine. And so let's go ahead and try our next piece and we'll talk about how that drizzle gets on there, okay? So this one is our raspberry satin cream. And it has this really fancy little drizzle on it. And that was made through a stribbing machine. And each chocolate has its own unique design. I think there's about 16 different varieties we have that have this design on, different designs on it. This particular one is gonna let you know that this one is raspberry. So When it goes underneath the curtain of chocolate, it'll go through a cooling tunnel. From there, it will go through the stribner, and the stribner is basically these tiny little hoses with little streams of chocolate going down. And what happens is, as the pieces go through, it's actually shaking in different patterns, depending on how the chocolate is supposed to be designed. So just those small little micro movements of the shaking machine will change how the chocolate is flowing onto the piece. And so that's how this piece gets that kind of little interlaced design. So let's go ahead and go through the steps. Let's smell. Right away, you can tell that it's dark chocolate. It's a lot more roasted, a little bit more bitter smelling. So let's go ahead and take a bite. This piece has a really thick, very fudgy texture, but it's also very soft and satiny, and it just melts in your mouth. So, so good. So this one is our raspberry buttercream. We use a raspberry puree, and when they make this piece, basically it kind of looks like caramel. It is a butter, caramelized sugar, and then they cool it down in the machine that you see in the photo here. This is our cream beater. They've actually specifically designed this to where it will mix the buttercream in the way that Ethel did in her kitchen in Tacoma, Washington, when she first started making chocolates in 1911. So it is a double boiler. So basically there's two tanks. One is filled with water, so it slowly cools it down. And that is very important because that's what causes the buttercream to be so smooth. Because of the fact that we cool it down so slowly, it gives the sugar time to cool down to where it doesn't crystallize. And that's why there's no graininess to it. As it's cooling, it's changing in texture. And when it gets to the right level of coolness, the right temperature, the chef can tell just by the feel of it and the look of it when it's ready. He'll then turn the machine on and it will start blending. But with the way the spatulas are designed, they're kind of curved in a way to where it kind of creates this like folding motion where it kind of folds in on itself very slowly. And that, combined with the cooling process of it happening all at the same time, creates this piece to be really fudgy and almost kind of like dough. When you first see it, it looks like caramel. It literally has that look of a creamy caramel. Then they put the fruit puree in. It gets really dark purple. And if you're not watching it at that exact moment when it suddenly just changes into this like fluffy pink color that you're seeing in your piece now, you just can't imagine like how it got from this dark purple color to this light fluffy texture. It's really interesting. So hopefully when you come visit us at the factory, you'll get to see that. It's really cool. So all the flavors of this one, it's like roasted because of the dark chocolate. It's floral notes because of the raspberry, lots of tart flavor there. Yeah, this one's really, really delicious. All right, remember to cleanse your palate and we'll move on to the last piece. I don't want it to end. We're having so much fun. This is our dark chocolate lemon satin cream. I would say out of all the ones that we're trying today, this is probably my favorite. They saved the best for last. It's one of our #1 pieces. And it was one of Ethel M's original recipes. So you kind of have to like it. No, I'm just kidding. All right, let's go ahead and smell the piece. Again, you're smelling that rich, dark aroma of the chocolate, more high cocoa content there. And this one's nice and shiny. And the look of it is completely different. It's really, really, really smooth. And we'll get into details on why that is. But let's go ahead and take a bite. You heard that nice snap. Hopefully, guys, you heard a snap too. That means the chocolate was perfectly tempered. You can see all that drippy chocolate. Oh, mine looks exactly like the photo. That's cool. It looked just like the little drip. Okay, so this one is an enrobed piece. So, sorry, this one's not an enrobed piece is what I meant to say. This is molded. And basically, the mold process is for all the creamy centers that are too runny to go through the enrober. This piece, as you can tell, it's really runny, it's kind of gooey, but it's also kind of thick at the same time. It's not too liquidy of a center. And that's because we use a lemon puree. And because that lemon puree is a lot more juicy, it's going to change the texture of the buttercream, even though the buttercream starts the same way as the raspberry buttercream. So what happens is they go through a molding process. It's called the one-shot depositor. So there's basically 2 tanks, and one will have the filling and one will have the chocolate shell, and they connect with nozzles. So there's an inside nozzle connected to the filling. There's an outside nozzle connected to the chocolate shell, and it does the chocolate shell and the filling at the exact same time. It takes about 60 seconds per mold. So after it fills the mold, it goes through a cooling tunnel for about 45 minutes, and then they're able to hand pack it. The shiny texture look of the piece comes from the fact that the chocolate is perfectly tempered and the fact that it's cooling next to a mold. So a perfectly smooth surface, and there's no air contact. So because of that, it's going to have a nice shiny look when it comes out of the mold. All right, so what flavor notes are you getting from this one? This one definitely goes into roasted. It's gonna go into a little bit of the dairy, but mostly roasted and fruity. It's zesty. It's very kind of like a sassy piece. It kind of bites back a little bit, kind of draws your jaws up from that sharp, zesty lemon. So yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite pieces because it's so unique. A lot of people say that they've never really thought of lemon in chocolate before, and they've tried it and they've loved it. So definitely let us know, like, what was your favorite piece that you tried today? We love to find out, like, what was your favorite piece? And thank you guys again so much for joining us. I'll hand it back to Lauren. She's going to tell you about what the up and coming things are and give you that code that you're talking about.
Thank you so much. So we do have a few questions. One question was about the difference between milk and dark chocolate. Do you know about the ratio of, I guess it would be cocoa, but to make it milk versus dark, or kind of what do we have, milk versus dark?
Okay, so there is definitely a ratio. I don't have the exact numbers for you, but there is a certain amount of cacao in order for it to be called a milk chocolate versus a dark chocolate.
What is our percentage that we have?
Our milk chocolate is 34, and then our dark chocolate is 54% cacao.
Okay, that's awesome.
And I do know that I believe, like, for dark chocolate, it has to be at least like 40%, like 38 to 40% cacao to be considered a dark, and anything less than that would be considered like a milk chocolate.
Gotcha. Another question, is the caramel in the salted caramel the same as the caramel and the pecan caramel Rapture?
I believe it is a different texture, but not by much, because of the fact that the chewy caramel we can lay on the table and then cut into little bite-sized pieces, and then it's shaped fine. But with the Rapture, it has to be a little bit softer, because as it's still warm, we're dropping it through the extruder machine. So they have to be able to pour the caramel through that and make the little caramel patty. So it is a different texture. And there's actually, I think I was told there's like 8 different textures of caramel that we make. So that's crazy. We have like a creamy caramel, we have the chewy caramel, and the Rapture caramel. We have a caramel for the apples, and we also have a different caramel for the Forever Yours bar, which is like a nougat and caramel, and it's enrobed in a dark rich chocolate. That one's really good too.
I have a question of my own, so if anyone else has any questions, go ahead and type them in. But what is your favorite piece, Tammy Jo, and why?
My favorite piece is...
And has it changed since you started working here over 20 years?
Okay, that's a good one. So when I first got here, my favorite piece would have, let's see, I would say peanut butter. When I first started, I wasn't a fan of white chocolate. I wasn't a fan, okay, I'll tell you a funny story. When I first started working at Ethel M, I worked in a department where we actually had a miniature enrober, where we actually got to show customers how we made the center, how it ran through the machine, and then we gave them a sample of what they got to try. And it was a white chocolate enrober. I personally did not like white chocolate when I first started, but I tried it because I was around it all day, and we started making almond clusters in white chocolate. And I apologize for the teas, but we know we do not make them anymore in white chocolate. But we also used to make macadamia nuts, and that was kind of my favorite piece because I could just sit there and eat them like all day long. Then it changed because I overdid it, and I overdid it so much I can't even. Oh wait, hang on. Sorry about that. My lights went out. I overdid it, and now I just can't eat anything with white chocolate macadamia nut. And they always are paired together. I can't do it. My second favorite after that was peanut butter. Oh my gosh, the peanut butter is amazing. It's so roasted and so creamy. Absolutely love it. But now my number one favorite, now that I'm a dark chocolate fan, I'm more into the darks, is Coconut Delight. It's been my number one favorite for the past like 15 years. That was my number one favorite.
Yes.
Looks like most of you voted for the dark chocolate lemon satin cream.
Yes, which I do have a question about that. How do you get the filling into that piece, the lemon?
That is the one-shot depositor. So basically they have a mold. It has like a round cavity. There's about 28 little pieces for one mold, they can make about 28 pieces. The mold will get warmed. It'll go through and get underneath a one-shot depositor. And basically there's two tanks, and one will have the filling and one will have the chocolate shell. And they basically go through these little nozzles at the same exact time. So one will have the filling, one will have the shell. And because the filling is going in at the same time, it's creating this pressure to push the chocolate on the outside of the mold as the filling is kind of like filling that center part, so it can't like get mixed together. And the reason why it works and it doesn't melt all together is because the chocolate is perfectly tempered to where it's like just the right thickness and the filling. So when they're putting it in together, it's not going to blend together. It's just going to be separate and completely. When they stop the filling, they top it off with chocolate, and then that finishes the piece, and then goes through the curtain of chocolate, goes through the cooling tunnel.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And then we have one last question. Do you know, I know it changes seasonally, but how many different pieces of chocolate do we have, different flavors? Do you know in general that number? I know we get some.
I think there's like 36 to around, I think 36, but if you count all the seasonal, it's like maybe like 45. I should know this by heart. I apologize, but like that's my educated guess. I'd say at least 45 different varieties, maybe.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I do want to talk about the upcoming tasting we have, which is our International Beer Tasting. So if you didn't know, International Beer Day is August 6th. So we're going to do a tasting, and we're going to send out some beer suggestions, send you the chocolate. So if you want to go ahead and buy that or any other gifts or chocolates for you or any friends and family, use that code VIRTUAL at checkout, and you will get 15% off of your total order. I also want to mention that we're going to be sending out an email from our Ethel M email. It's going to be a survey asking you what you thought about this tasting, what you enjoyed about it. We would love your feedback. We always want to be getting better and improving. So if you don't mind, please fill that out and let us know how we did. And with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday and have a safe and fun weekend. Thank you.
Bye.